takes a village. When people experience emotions in their flowing states, they're often astonished that their emotions don't feel dangerous, time consuming, or embarrassing. The emotions are so gentle in their flowing states that it's hard to identify them at first. The emotions have been shoved so far into the shadows that we often aren't aware of what's going on inside us. Our natural and innate empathetic intelligence is not welcomed, exercised, or honored. But empathy is a normal human skill, and from the animals I've known, I'd say it's a skill in most animals as well. The skill of empathy allows us to read the interior state, the intentions, the emotions, the desires, and the possible actions of other people or animals. If we're good at reading emotions, our social intelligence and our emotional intelligence tend to be very high. We get people and animals and their needs in the way that some intellectual geniuses get mathematics or physics, in the way that artistic geniuses get colors, shape, and perspective. Em- Empathy is one of the multiple kinds of intelligences we have. However, most of us grew up in a world where multiple intelligences were not understood yet. It was only in 1983 that Harvard psychologist Howard Gardner's work on multiple intelligences became known. Dr. Gardner identified more than just the logical intelligence that most people focus on at the time. The intelligence that allows us to do math and science, identify patterns, and use logic and deductive reasoning. Logical intelligence is the one that can be measured on an IQ test, and for decades it was the only aptitude that was openly called intelligence. Dr. Gardner saw intelligence differently, and he put his name to 6 other forms of intelligence that go along with logical intelligence. 4 of these intelligences are linguistic intelligence, which allows us to write, communicate, and learn other languages skillfully; musical intelligence, which allows us to identify tone, pitch, and rhythm, and to appreciate, compose, perform musically; bodily kinesthetic intelligence, which allows us to utilize our bodies and our musculature with great skill. Think of dancers, athletes, gymnasts. And then spatial intelligence, or the ability to recognize patterns in space and utilize space in novel ways. Architects, builders, people who are good at geometry, and most visual artists are in the spatial intelligence category. The other 2 intelligences Dr. Gardner identified are interpersonal intelligence, which allows us to understand intentions, motivations, and desires of others, and interpersonal intelligence, which gives us the ability to understand our own motivations, intentions, and desires. There are incredibly important forms of intelligence that help us pilot through the social world. To be an effective empath, it's important to focus on these interpersonal and intrapersonal areas of intelligence, though all of our other intelligences are important as well. Right now, as you're reading, you're using your linguistic intelligence, and in the chapter where we learn our 5 empathetic skills, you'll use your bodily, kinesthetic, and spatial intelligences as well. None of our intelligences exist without the others, so it's not as if you have to turn any of them off. In fact, you use your logical intelligence all the time, and while your musical intelligence may not seem to be active right now, musical ability is connected to your ability to use and understand language. Because language incorporates rhythm, pitch, phrasing, and listening. When you're reading, you're also relying upon your interpersonal intelligence to translate the words on the page and decide what I mean, what I intend, and what I want you to understand. And you're using your intrapersonal intelligence to respond, react, and feel your way through what you're reading. With the ground of Dr. Gardner's work to stand on, we can refer to intelligence as a constellation of abilities and not simply those skills you use on an IQ test. Not simply those skills you use on IQ tests. However, here's the problem for empaths. When most of us were growing up, the only kind of intelligences that mattered were the logical and spatial forms. Maybe our musical or artistic intelligences were also accessed in school, and probably our bodily, sports-focused abilities were too. But PE and art were probably not equal focus of our school day. When I went to school, PE and art were not seen as essential to learning, and now, with all the budgetary problems and the testing focus facing schools, PE and art are even less likely to take up large part of the school day. Therefore, we don't tend to access all our intelligences at school. It is telling that our interpersonal and intrapersonal intelligences are not part of our formal schooling at all. I think I took a class called citizenship once, but I can't really remember it. What I do remember in school and out of it is that behavioral and social skills were often taught on the fly. We learned how to act by watching others or by being praised or yelled at, but there wasn't any actual instruction. We learned to be in relationships and to be siblings or friends through osmosis or by the seat of our pants. We didn't receive instruction about our relationships or emotions unless we made some huge social mistake, such as openly displaying unwanted emotions like anger, jealousy, or envy in our mood states. We were taught math and logic, we were taught art and music, we were taught PE, and we were taught reading, writing, and languages, but in regard to our emotions, our interpersonal skills, and our interpersonal skills, we were just supposed to have figured it out somehow. We got demerits or gold stars for our behavior, but we didn't learn how to identify our emotions or work with them skillfully. If we acted out our anger, we would probably be sent to the principal or the school counselor, or we'd have to go to detention or stay after school. The anger would take us out of the normal school day, out of the classroom, out of the way. And the other kids would learn. You don't do that. You don't express anger, or you'll be shamed. If we acted out our fear or our sadness, we might be seen as weaklings, and we may maybe become targets for other kids, or we might become teacher's pet, which is often the same thing as being a target. We certainly didn't learn that anger helps us set effective boundaries, or that fear is our intuition, or that sadness helps us relax and let go of things. We don't let go of things we don't need anyway. What I also noticed at school, and it may have been different for you, is that acting out our compassion was also frowned upon. For instance, if a child was being isolated and identified as a geek or target, you took your social survival into your own hands if you tried to befriend him or stick up for him. If you didn't have status, that is. Sometimes I saw kids with status, the cool kids, the pack leaders, reach out with compassion and essentially throw a cloak of protection over a social outcast, but it didn't happen as often as it needed to. What I saw growing up and what I still see is that we're asked to grow into maturity while keeping two of our most important intelligences under wraps, in the shadows, out of the way and off the radar. I lost my place. As adults, we tend to need therapists, counselors, and psychiatrists to help us access our emotions and our interpersonal and intrapersonal intelligences, even though these intelligences belong to us and are essential to pretty much everything we do. It's not surprising then that we don't know what emotions are, what they want, or what they do. It's not surprising that we're left to create a ground under the emotions by ourselves. Dr. Gardner's multiple intelligences gives us an excellent foundation, but I also want to add another model, which is the 4-element or quaternity model. She says, it's elemental, my dear. In order to create more support for our transition into empathetic awareness, I like to present the 4-element or quaternity model, where earth is the physical world and your body, air is your mental and intellectual realm, water is your emotional and artistic realm, and fire is your visionary or spiritual realm. This model gives us a way to both deepen and clarify our understanding of concepts. If we can place people or situations into a quaternal model and observe their earthliness, their airy aspects, their watery movements, and their fiery natures, we can understand a little bit more about them. The 4-element theory is not a scientific one. We are not, nothing is, made up of only 4 elements. This elemental framework is mythological and poetic in origin, and it has been used for centuries and across cultures as a way to gain understanding of the world. As we're learning now, the fire element, with its dreams and visions that seem to come out of nowhere, is turning out to be a function of an exquisitely attuned brain and nervous system. When we speak of the fire element, therefore, it is important to keep in mind that the entire realm of fire, dreams, spirituality, and vision, is very likely a function of neurological and not paranormal processes. However, this does not make our fiery aspects any less fascinating or useful. In our modern world, we have grown in leaps and bounds toward an intellectual understanding of the universe, the earth, human and animal behavior, and the brain. However, we haven't grown as strongly in our ability to put our understanding into everyday practice. As we explore this concept of the quaternity, we're engaging not just our logical abilities, but also our intelligences that understand nuance, mythology, and dreams. In truth, we have to engage the older and more empathetic parts of the brains to understand the deep and gorgeous realm of the emotions. Even though the quaternity model is mythological, understanding our own 4 elements and their interactions brings unusual stability into our lives. When we can envision the emotions as our internal water element, as the part of us that embodies fluidity and flow, we can bring clarity into our interpersonal and intrapersonal intelligences. With water as our model, we can understand the function of emotions, the properties of emotions, and the positions emotions should take in our lives. Water has many distinct properties, and it's valuable to study them in relation to the emotions. Water is soft and flowing, but it can wear down boulders and mountains. It is a great conductor of heat and energy, and it can carry things within itself through its ability to support weight and create buoyancy. It moves and flows around anything put in its path, and it usually finds a way to the deepest, most grounded places. Water can even travel upward. It moves constantly. If you put a lot of energy into it, water can change its form. It can shape shift into vapor or form itself into a solid block of ice. Water moves back and forth between states in a constant flow, just as emotions move, or should move, between their free-flowing and obvious moved states in a constant flow. Water makes plant life possible. It quenches and bathes every living creature, and it regulates temperature of our entire planet. The unusual properties and qualities of water make life on Earth possible. The unusual properties and qualities of your watery emotions can do the same for your living system if you let them. When you understand that water needs to flow, you can begin to behave properly when water rises in your own psyche. If you can simply allow your emotions to flow as water does, and if you can respond to them honorably, you can create balance within yourself. Movement and flow are the central properties of water and of the emotions themselves. Mythologically and psychologically, water is the unconscious, the great container, the place from which all life and all impulses originate. The word emotion even has roots in the water. It comes from the Latin emotus or emovere, to move outward, to flow outward. Allowing your emotions to flow naturally is the foundation of the ability to channel emotions properly and skillfully. If you can simply let your emotions flow, if you can notice them, welcome them, let them move freely through your life, you will begin to heal. You won't have to increase your emotional flow with overt expression that often creates too much flow if your emotions are very fierce. Rather, you can consciously welcome each of your emotions. And this is welcoming your emotions as an example. Here's an example of welcoming your emotions. Imagine you've just been cut off the freeway. The emotions that arise are usually fear and anger. Fear, in its mood state, ramps up your instincts and your intuition to let you know you're endangered. And your anger rushes forward to help you rebuild your disrupted boundaries. If you express these emotions, you might scream and swear, gesture rudely, or even chase the offensive driver, none of which would take you out of danger or rebuild your boundaries. If you repress your fear, your instincts, and your anger, your ability to set boundaries, and try to ignore the rudeness and keep driving, you'll most likely be less aware and less conscious for the next few minutes or miles again. You won't reduce your danger or rebuild your sense of safety. But if you welcome both emotions and allow them to flow through your system, you can increase your awareness. You could use your fear to sharpen your senses. That's what properly flowing fear does. It increases your focus and awareness. Your fear could help you ask yourself where your attention was and why you were so startled. Your fear could also help you think about ways to prevent such inattentiveness in the future. You could also use your anger to make the proper corrections to get yourself away from the unsafe driver. Properly honored anger would enable you to quickly and consciously rebuild the traffic boundaries around your car. It would protect you from recklessness of others and help you become a more skillful driver yourself. When you welcome and attend to your fear and anger consciously, neither one will endanger you or the other driver. Rather, they'll simply help you increase your awareness and skill. When you and your car are out of danger and your emotions have been attended to consciously, both your fear and anger will then flow and move on as they should. Neither emotion will need to stay active in its mood state, and you won't have to obsessively relive the incident or drive unconsciously for the rest of the day, because you'll have handled the situation and the emotions appropriately. If you can honor your emotions and welcome them as life-giving water element that they will behave exactly as water does. They'll flow and change, shift their states, react and respond appropriately. They'll create the perfect ecosystem in which you can flourish. Allowing your emotions to flow freely inside your psyche brings life-affirming water and empathetic awareness into your life.